This is my story of how, as a young man, I nearly gave up on trading after losing over £30,000. Everything I had to my name at the time, literally everything. And this is my story of how I've gone from minus £30,000 now to trading my own personal portfolio of over £800,000. And in this story, I'm going to take you right back to the start and tell you where it all began, the struggles, everything that I've gone through, and how I've now got myself to the point where I am today. If you're watching this, there's a high likelihood something is incredibly frustrating in your trading journey right now. There may be a lot of good things going for you in your personal life, a lovely family, a good network of friends, a good paying job, but trading you still can't make work, and you are still finding it the most frustrating skill in the world to crack. So, before trading, I was just a very quiet kid, and I grew up in a tiny little village just outside of the city of Peterborough. And so from the age of 9 and from the age of 10 as well, so I did it for 2 years in the end, I was up every Saturday, every Sunday, 5 a.m. on the dot, and I was getting those and collecting those papers at 5:30 and delivering around the village. Now, £14 is what they paid me. £14 for a weekend of work. And it doesn't seem a lot at the time, but as a 9 and a 10-year-old, £14 a weekend, that's £56 a month, adds up. And actually, it really installed into me from very young that actually, that feeling of earning your own money. A lot of people don't get that feeling until they're maybe 18 and they've left school, or they're 21 and they finally got a job after university, and they think, oh my goodness, this money's mine. I've earned this. That sense of self-accomplishment. No. I had that from the age of 9, and my jobs didn't stop there. So I then had a local pot washing job at our local pub when I was 13, and then I held that for a good 2 years as well. And then when I was old enough, I worked in a supermarket when I was 16 on a meat and fish counter and the checkouts. So I did a lot. But as I was saying earlier, it allowed me to build and earn money and realize actually from a very young age, maybe that 9 to 5 life isn't for me. And it taught me from very young that actually, if I had a 9 to 5 for the rest of my life, I'm not necessarily going to have the freedom and the time freedom that I wanted. And I was racking my brains about what that could potentially be. And trading was simply the answer. It made so much sense. Time freedom, no boss, no cap on earnings potential. And I wasn't oblivious to how difficult trading is. I know it was an incredibly difficult skill to master at the time, and the odds were incredibly slim. But I said to myself, and this is where it came back to those early days, growing up with nothing, that installation of hard work up here was that, well, if somebody else can do it, why can't I? So growing up through secondary school, I kept myself incredibly introverted. I did have a group of friends, but I was predominantly the quiet one all of the time. And I did play a lot of sport. My parents always pushed us to play athletics and football and hockey. So like most teenagers, I had a very active childhood. I was pretty useless when it came to academia. I was good at economics, I was good at maths, and I was good at sport. Everything else was a complete write-off. And so when you saw my GCSE grades and you saw my A-level grades, they weren't the best. But I excelled in those 2 free subjects that I mentioned a minute ago, because ultimately I had a passion for them, I was interested in them, and so I naturally hence worked hard at them, and it came more naturally to me. So when I came across trading, it just made total sense in my head. And I actually came across it at the age of 14, because that's when I was starting to do economics at school. And as I said earlier, it just made total sense to me. And I almost had that aha, that light bulb moment pretty early on. And for me, in the UK, you can't legally open a brokerage account till the age of 18. So I guess it was a blessing in disguise in a way, because it forced me to just have to focus on education. It forced me just to have to read books and find what I could on YouTube at the time, before I could then eventually open that live account at 18. So although I've been trading live for 11 years, my whole journey's actually been about 15 years in total, which is, well, making me feel very old, put it that way. So I will always be transparent about this journey. When I started live trading 18, that's when I realized how much of a physical and mental torture this game can be if you don't get it right. My first 2.5 years were grim, hideous. One of the worst things I can think of. Physically, I always thought I was quite a strong person with all the sport I'd played. Mentally was the same. And I'll be honest, other than not growing up with much in life, I hadn't had a huge amount of mental hardship in terms of losing people, in terms of going through huge amounts of trauma. So when it came to trading, oh my goodness, mentality wise, it sucker punched the life out of me. And I remember for those first 2.5 years, losing days, losing weeks, losing months. I would have maybe one winning trade in 15, one winning trade in 20. There was no structure, no system. I had no formal education with it. I was just chopping and changing from book to book, YouTube video to YouTube video, picking up a bit of this, picking up a bit of that, and just trying to piece it all together and bring it all together. And it took me ages to realize that actually, just because you spent 1 year, 2 years, 2.5 years in trading doesn't mean you're going to have anything to show for it at the end of those 2 years. Because that's exactly what happened to me. 2 years in, or 2.5 years in, I had nothing to show for it other than minus £30,000. Genuinely. All my savings I had at the time, any money I'd received over the years from Christmases, birthdays, predominantly all of it came from most of my paying jobs. And I had nothing to show for it after 2.5 years. And all of that had gone down the drain. And the absolute sheer embarrassment, the sheer guilt, even though it was my money, I felt like I'd lost everybody's money. I felt like I lost my family's money. This massive, overwhelming guilt and anxiety. And I'm not normally an anxious person, I'm very mentally resilient these days. But back then, as a young man, it just felt like trading was this this impossible thing to master. Genuinely. And I promise you not, there's been over probably 20, 30, 40 times I've been this close to stopping in those first 2.5 years. This close. Because it was an absolute savage physically and mentally. It was honestly so emotionally draining. There were days where I would sit and cry about it and keep myself in my room for days and be a complete recluse. Because in my mind, from such a young age, I've always thought, I want to work for myself. I want to earn my own money. I want to be in full control of both time freedom and my finances. And trading, once I came across it when I was 14, was always that avenue. It was always that thing I was working towards. When I finally turned 18, I could trade a live account. That would be me set. That would be me. I'd be that guy and it would be fine. So when I was 2.5 years and I had still nothing to show for it, you can imagine the absolute crippling anxiety I had about it, and forced me into a degree of feeling like life's over. And don't get me started online, because all you would see online at the time was people posting wins, posting all these massive hyped up trades, massive wins, fake profits, fake demo accounts. And because of my naivety at the time, I just assumed it was all real and thought, what am I doing wrong? It seems so easy. It seems, why can't I crack it? Why me? There was so much self-pity and self-wallowing at the time, and such lack of self-accountability. It was truly quite embarrassing looking back. Really, really, really embarrassing. And so when I looked in from that outside hindsight perspective, I had no discipline. I was not proud of myself of who I was, both financially and physically. And there's just utter chaos. There was no, as I said earlier, no structure, no discipline to it, no formal teaching, no guidelines, no mentorship, nothing like that gave me or paved the way. And that moment of hindsight where I just took a step back because it had got so much and I was in such a rut, both physically and mentally, taking that step back that summer was the best thing I ever did. I'd realised I was trying to skip the hardest part. I was trying to skip my foundational stages. I was trying to rush things. I was trying to make money like that. And I was realising I was going to keep hitting a brick wall. It doesn't matter, as I said earlier. I could have been going and doing this for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years at the same rate I was going at. I'd still have been no further along. So I knew it was time for a change. It was time to step back, and it was time to have a complete change of tack. And looking back now in hindsight, where I can reflect on it and I can smile about it in hindsight, those years absolutely made me, because it broke me and broke me and broke me down and down and down and down to the point where I said, enough is enough. If I am going to make this work, if I am going to be in that top 1%, I have to change tact. I have to do things differently, because what I've been doing for the last 2.5 years is going to, well, who knows where it was going to lead me up in. A huge amount of debt, a huge amount of a hole that I could probably never have recovered from. So something had to change. So I pushed the reset button. I started journaling for the first time properly and taking that seriously. I knew of journaling and that process, but I'd always been far too undisciplined and far too lazy to care about doing it. So I started journaling everything from ground up, stripped it all away, and started by thinking, right, how can I lose properly? Because I was aware that yes, losing trades will always be a thing. You will always have losing trades, you will have losing days, you will even have losing weeks. But I said to myself, how do I lose the right way, the proper way, with proper risk being managed, mitigating my downside, properly managing position sizing? And I brought in, and I promised myself for the next 90 days, I was going to be incredibly consistent, start building from the ground up and not break one singular rule. I was never going to over leverage. I was never going to over position. And I promised myself, do that for 90 days and look and see where it takes you, because it can only be a better place than what it was, because I was already starting from minus, not even ground zero, but minus. So as I started building my strategy out, I was ruthless with back testing it. I was ruthless with forward testing on live accounts. So again, that gave me the psychological side as well. I journaled this as well. Everybody just journals the technical side. But I started to journal my thoughts. I started to journal, how do I feel about this pre-trade? How did I feel about it in the trade? How did I feel about it after the trade? And everything else in between and before and after. Because it uncovers all these little refinements and tweaks. And I started to build and see this positive momentum. And it didn't even take the full 90 days in the end. It ended up taking me about 20 to 30 days. In that first month, I already started seeing that sort of positive momentum, that positive snowball effect. Because again, where I'd come from was a load of absolute rubbish. So I was starting to build this positive momentum. And guess what? The results were then starting to come. Now, they still weren't brilliant at that point, but I was starting to see little wins where I thought, that makes sense. That synchronicity and that with that, and if I listen to that and I just hold off on all these little nooks and crannies and details, which eventually, as I forward tested it still, as I back tested it still, as I journaled the heck out of every single detail, you started to see actually you're building this strategy from ground up. It's like building a skyscraper, level by level, continually reassessing, how can I make this better? How can I make this stronger? How can I make this safer? How can I keep mitigating my downside? And I built it and I built it and I built it. And by the time 90 days had come round, I was already in the good habits now. Those habits had already formed after a month or two. But I built the good habits. I'd seen some positive momentum. I'd seen some wins, and I thought, hang on a minute, this is plausible. This is possible. I realized it was me. I'd always been the problem. It wasn't the markets. I was always blaming. There was never any self-accountability in my life, hence why I was a skinny little young man with nothing to show. And so as I started taking self-accountability, I took up running and athletics again in that 90 days. I took up the gym again in those 90 days and committed to that process. And the mental clarity that came from that personal change in life as well was huge on my trading. It made me easier to follow my rules. It made me easier to stick to the plan because I was starting to see results. Now, was it just 90 days? Absolutely not. It took me years and years still. But I found from that 2.5 year mark to 3.5 years, that was my breakthrough year, my eureka moment, my light bulb moment, if that's what people want to call it. From 3.5 years onwards, that's when I really then saw proper trading consistency and being a proper professional about it. And the results then came themselves and spoke for themselves. And fast forward to this day, this is why I built the Anomaly Trader. I worked in silence for over 9 years before I ever launched the Anomaly Trader last year in 2024. I have indisputable amounts of evidence behind me, and that's why I worked in silence and silence and silence. So when I did launch last year, I've got all this evidence behind me to prove I am who I say I am. My strategy can stand the test of time. My strategy can work in all market conditions. I can execute it and be a fantastic manager of that. I can manage my risk fantastically, being an ultra disciplined person, and so on and so on. So when I did launch the Anomaly Trader, I could be a genuine force for good in the industry, a very, very toxic industry. and that I can meet and work with like-minded traders who are in the position that I was in those first 2.5 years, where things just feel like nothing is working, nothing is sticking, and that trading is this impossible skill to make work for you. But I am living proof that it is possible. I am living proof, and I have made every mistake under the sun. I have lost all the amounts of money possible. I am living proof that you can still come through it, but you have to get the right system. You have to double down on the things that work, because it is possible to make it. But unfortunately, there is so much noise out there now, and there even was back in the day. You know, as I said, I was jumping from this to this and strategy to strategy. There is so much noise out there. I also pride myself on taking absolutely every single trade live. That's my wins, my losses, my break-evens, posting at the time of taking it. It's all timestamped, it's all verified, so people can say and see what proper professional retail trading looks like from someone of myself of over 11 years. The reason I also do this, it's not for people to copy, it's for people to see, look, he can trade back then, he can trade now, and this is what proper professional results look like. I find it's the most truest, most transparent way to continue proving who I am as a trader, as a person, as a genuine mentor. And I will always continue to post every single trade I take live. Fast forward 18 months now since the Anomaly Trader launched, I've helped traders go from ground zero to 4 figures a month. I've helped break-even traders who have been 3, 4, 5 years into their journey go from break-even trader to £20,000 a month. So my system works, it's incredibly robust, and genuinely being able to now give back and help that younger former self back when I was sort of 2.5 years in. It's incredibly rewarding, and launching the Anomaly Trader was the best decision I've ever made. It's certainly been a long journey so far for me personally, but a journey that I'm incredibly proud of now looking back on, and I'm incredibly grateful for those first 2.5 years. So if you're someone that's resonated with any part of my journey, my story, please feel free to book a call below and we can talk and we can see how we can help you with your trading journey.